I'm going to take us over to the lobby, not from the lobby over into Jason's classroom. So hang on, everybody. Here we go.
Hang on.
Let's go shape-shifting.
Okay. Have a great session. We're in the background if you need us, Jace.
Sounds good.
Here it comes. Enjoy, everyone.
All right. Thank you very much, Chuck and Stephen. Way too kind with that introduction, but I really appreciate that. And I didn't realize Chuck and I had such pink domes, but the more I look at Stephen's getup there, I'm like, yeah, it's pretty pink, isn't it? Thank you, welcome, thanks for coming. If you're here live with us, thank you so much. And if you're watching the recording, thank you as well. And thanks so much to ITDI and Chuck, Barbara, Stephen, and the rest of the folks at ITDI for teaming up with us at Gallery, Gallery Languages, galleryteachers.com, a website launching in the fall, in September 1st, and very excited to bring that to you. So Gallery is very happy to be a part of the summer intensive, and I've been really enjoying being here as a co-host with Chuck. And the title of the presentation today is Practice Makes Perfect. And I had a ... there. I don't have it here now, but practice makes perfect opportunities to use English. Do you like the phrase practice makes perfect? Is that something you would use in the classroom? Is that advice you would give for language learning, do you think, usually? Because it has both, I think, a positive and a kind of negative connotation for me. So if you say yes, I think we're thinking the same way, that it's a great way to encourage people that if they're not doing as well as they want, they just practice is important. But it can also be a little negative to me. Does the word perfect bother you at all? And that's why I did a kind of play on this here with yes. And Stephen got into that very nicely yesterday. What's the problem with perfect? What do you think Stephen means here when he's saying it could cause problems? It goes together with a growth mindset. Interesting. Because no one is perfect. Perfect to me has some pretty unsavory, well, it's not really the right word. It can make, I think, students get more anxious and think too much, monitor their English too much. Does it even exist? There's always room for improvement. I think that's the great thing about practice makes perfect. But anyway, I chose this title because for me, what's so great about practice, and we'll get into what I think that means, practice, is what it can offer students, how it can deliver them into situations where they can use English to achieve their goals. So that's why I use this title. There's a video that I often show teachers and students sometimes too. I got it from YouTube. It's from a television show. Do you know which television show this is? And which character that is? Sesame Street, yeah. And who's that guy? I'm not going to show the video. I wish I could. It takes too long. I'm just going to explain it to you. Oh, there's his full name. I never thought about it that way. Yep, that's Ernie. The interesting thing is that this video is actually from the pilot show of Sesame Street, which never aired publicly. The first show, 1969, I believe. And what happens in the video, I'm just going to explain it to you because it takes too long to show it. And I was going to grab the link for it. And I'll try to grab the link while I'm talking because I think I have it right here actually on my desktop. But anyway, yeah, here it is. So let me grab it for you. So if you feel like watching it while we're talking about it, you can. The reason I love talking about this is that in the video, or it's a YouTube video from the show, but in the segment of the show, Ernie says, let's watch a video about the letter D. And the video begins, and it's these two kids, and it's this song, little rap, little chant about the letter D. And that's not so extraordinary in of itself, although it was one of the early use of animation like that in education. What's really, really interesting is that after the video plays, after Ernie shows, we watch letter D, Ernie says, and this is in this, let me see if I can, yeah, so Ernie says in the third box here, he says, you know what, that was such a great video, let's watch it again, right? So he applauds, you can see, and he says, let's watch it again. He plays it again, or they show it again on the TV there. So we're watching Ernie watching. And then after they play it again, Ernie says, that was so good, let's watch it again. And he does it 2 more times. The little rap about the letter D, which has words letter D, goes 4 times. Why? Why would they do that? And maybe they didn't air it because they thought people are going to think it's crazy watching the same thing 4 times in a row. This is 1969. Why would they do that? Repetition is great for learning. Yeah. And why would they need to do it this way? And why would we not need to do it this way today? He says, let's watch it again. That video was so great. Let's watch it again. Especially young learners. Yeah, but I will argue strongly that it's also important for all of us. And one of the reasons it's so hard for older folks to acquire language is because we're not repeating enough, especially in a fun, engaged way. There's no video playback, Mark says. Exactly. And I want to talk in this presentation about how fortunate we all are as teachers and learners to be living at a time where repeating, whether it's songs or video segments, just by pressing a little button, not anything really fancy anymore, is just such a great opportunity. I want to talk about practice today and how it can lead to more use of English. And to start, I'd like to focus on the differences between, because there's overlap, which we'll see right away, but important differences between learning about English, practicing English, and using English. So I wanted to begin with learning about English. What do you think I mean by that? Or what do you feel this means? What would be an example of learning about the language as opposed to practicing it or using it? Grammar rules, yep. Learning about the culture that uses the language, absolutely. Vocabulary. Any other ideas? The history of the language, certainly. Hey, hey, Josette. Instead of practicing the expression hey, hey, learning what hey, hey means. Talking about hey, hey. Comparing it with the L1. Good. So I have this slide here where just showing you how I think about it and talk to teachers about it. An important part is, maybe the most important part, raising awareness about whatever it is in English, whether it's cultural or linguistic or, right? So I have just linguistic stuff here, but that it's about more conscious learning as opposed to unconscious acquisition. So as you guys mentioned, grammar, structures, vocabulary, etc. I'm in trouble, right, for putting etc. there. We were talking about that before we began. I thought, God, I think I do have etc. in my presentation. Darn it. I think it's the only one. Would you agree that this is learning about English? And then other examples, something like this. Be very useful. And I mentioned that, now we live at a time where there are so many more opportunities to practice English. There are more opportunities also for learning about English. Because if you don't have a textbook, can't afford one, or you don't have one that has, let's go to a cooler graphic even. Something like this. I mean, imagine, before Facebook and other social media, what are your chances of having access to something like that? Fellas, is one of your mics on? Because I'm hearing something in the background. Just for the recording, you might want to switch that off. So the great thing is, of course, learning about the language, practicing and using are all important, and we have more opportunities for learning about it. The thing is, lots of opportunities to see graphics like this. Does that equal being able to use the language? I mean, can we jump from a lot of great learning about to using it under normal circumstances? What do you think? So can we get the difference between fun and funny stuck up here from something like this, so that when we're in a situation when we want to use English in a classroom activity or outside on the street, does it usually work that way? Not usually, right? We are not computers that can scan, put it in. But actually, that's what's always motivated me for my focus on practice, is that, all those great charts and things, how with students that don't get enough exposure naturally with the language, how can they get that stuff up here? Not so they can be computers that show on tests, oh, look how much I know about English, but that knowing about can be actually contribute to using it. Is this how you learn to ride a bicycle? I apologize if for some of you this is a worn out cliche about learning, but I find it's really important for both teachers and students to consider, because we do, I feel, all of us, myself included, get a little bit caught up or bogged down in learning about the language and explaining it, and going under the hood of the car, or whatever analogy you prefer. You never read manuals anyway. Well, I did a session for students the other day, and a student said, but isn't learning about English, is it bad? We shouldn't do it? Of course it's not bad. It's like saying, would it be bad to study a bicycle? No. But I think it's how much that you do this learning about. And if you want to teach English, or you want to be a linguist, the learning about, is so important, it's fascinating, but in the actual practice of getting your students proficient, how much Mark Brown says we need to do English. I could not agree more. So what is practicing English? If we're going to distinguish between learning about English, practicing it. Can you think of any examples of practicing it? And if you're thinking right now, and Mark was with me at another session where we talked about this, that practicing and using might overlap, absolutely they do. But I'm more interested in how we could make a distinction between practicing it and using it. What do you think about practicing? Can you think of an example of something your students do to practice English? Role plays, phoning for information. Phoning for information outside of class or as some more controlled practice? TV shows. Role plays is interesting. I can see role plays as both practicing and using, and I'll tell you what I mean in a moment. TV shows, yes. Both inside and outside, okay. Writing emails. So one thing, I think it was Mark that pointed out, maybe it was someone else, we were talking about this the other day, is that could practicing English, according to what I'm talking about today, be more controlled practice and using English be more freer practice? And I think so. Watching my videos and singing along, thank you. That is another example, sure. Practicing English. Yeah, it was you, Mark, right? So when you see this slide, which I'm trying, there it is. And this is ideal here, high volumes of input and output. Ideally, acquisition takes precedence over learning. Certainly that could be using too, although using English, it's not really possible to have high volumes of input and output if they don't have the opportunity to really use it in more freer contexts. So I have the word controlled here. And this is just my way of looking at it, and there are different ways of looking at it. But drills, dialogues, gap fills, games, TV shows, movie scenes, songs, poems, and stories. You notice I don't have role plays on here, and I'll show you why when we talk about using. Not because I don't think that they could also be practice. Is this learning about or practice? Yes, controlled as role plays. Role plays, for me, and again, this isn't scientific research type stuff I'm talking about. It's just a way of thinking about it. But yeah, controlled dialogues as role plays, I would put as practice, and then something that you've practiced to prepare for something freer would be more using, maybe. Learning about, right? And this one too, right? If we have more controlled and more freer learning about, maybe my poster is a little freer or focusing on the collocations, not on the explanations, but it's still learning about the language, isn't it? It's still, at its essence, it's a chart. So what could you do to practice with these chunks? They can use it when the pressure is on. Very nice. For me, exactly. Practice means if you get enough of it, when the pressure's on, use. What could be done with something like this? Dora's here and Matthew's here. Thanks, guys, for joining us. Could you think of a way of practicing these collocations? Chant, rap, rhythm. Global Noble, my favorite. In writing, using context, sure. Pull some of these out to put into a poem, a story, a dialogue, right? I made a song about it called Say and Tell, which has my friend in Brazil, Adir, singing on it. You can check that out if you want on YouTube. So if students are watching my video and reading, listening, and rapping along, to me, that's very much practice. Adir is great. Indeed. Another way to practice. Do you know Vicky Holland and Simple English videos? I have a feeling most of you do. I love her videos because they have some learning about in them. They don't specifically coach students to practice, but guess what? They're so good, so short and so good and funny that students often repeat them. Well, if they're repeating Vicky's videos and if they're just listening and reading, they're practicing on the input side of things. Thank you for that, Chuck. But many students find themselves repeating after Vicky when I've used her stuff in class. Another great example of this is my friend Story Paul in Argentina, who does videos. So there are lots of people out there doing stuff like that. And the key is, which we'll talk about soon, is the hook. Are students hooked? Do they like it? Will they repeat it? That's the true test, right? Someone said the other day, give them homework that you know they will do. I mean, this is nothing new, but what's new is students having the opportunity, Rose talked yesterday, having more autonomy to do more practice out of class. So what's using English? If you will, Chuck is quick on the draw today. I love it. Thanks to that, Chuck. Again, if you say, well, practice is using. Okay, I agree. But how might we distinguish using from these examples that we've just looked at of practice? We're not talking about now using English in a practice context, but more just using. Using the language to convey something meaningful to you. Love it. I'm with you. Like if you could watch my video or Vicky's video or someone's video enough times so that you got some of that target language up here and boom, you use it. Where, when, how? Do you think I mean just outside of class? Because I don't just mean outside of class. Communicating with someone. Well, here, see a couple people typing, so I'll wait a second. I'll move on and I'll get your comments as we go. So I think of it as really applying what you've learned. What you've learned about it, you've practiced it, so now you're going to apply it. And examples here, role plays, certainly as Josette mentioned before, if the role plays were in a very controlled context, they're more practice. But if they're more on the creating side of things, which is what I imagined here, I think it's more of using the language. Activating it, awesome. That's even better. I'm going to have to steal that one. I love debates too. Love them. And you can do them with young learners and with even beginners. Well, not very beginner, but you can do them with very, very simple language and pictures and things. And there's all kinds of great stuff you can do with debates. They feel a lot more real than role plays often. I have a feeling you're all familiar with this hierarchy of objectives for teachers to consider in the classroom. This is a cognitive hierarchy. Bloom had social, emotional, and this is the bare bones, 50s first Bloom one, which I have here not because I don't enjoy the revisions to it and all of the different ways people have modified it and extended it, but just for the purposes of this presentation, this is really the best one. Where is practice and where is use? I think for me, this is really helps, as basic in and not necessarily a good way this is. For my purposes, for this discussion, I think it really works. I love that word recall. You know, if you know my work, you know I'm always talking about the 3 R's: relax, repeat, remember. So remember, recall, right? And as we move up, right, comprehension, you can see I'm moving into freer practice, right? Moving into applying what you've learned into use. I think we all want to get our students there, right? We don't want them to be robots that just recall knowledge. But the question is, how well are they going to be able to apply, analyze, synthesize, evaluate if they don't have a foundation, in this sense, a foundation with the target language? Can they just look at the target language, the learning about, and then, you know, they've seen it enough, you've explained it, or they've looked it up in the dictionary, and then zoop, you're in a communicative activity, and what happens? Right? What do you think about this? And I think the answer here could be yes or no, or both, or you can probably guess what I want to highlight from here, what I want to focus on. No, yeah, I want to focus on how they're different. That is not to say that they aren't similar in some important ways. If you say no, then why? And Maria's already started us off. You must do your best in the performance. Good. Relearning the piano. Lucky you, you've got some foundation of piano. I wish I did. I've got a little bit. My son's great at it, but he hates it, so he doesn't do it. You don't want to be practicing in a performance. No audience. Concentrating more on the performance. Good. And in general, the performance is going to be more satisfying if you've what? Practiced or not? No trick questions in this presentation. And how about if you see a child doing scales over and over again on the piano? Would you come up to him or her and berate them? Why are you repeating the same things over and over? Why don't you do something a little more creative? You know, you're thinking Bloom's taxonomy. You know, what are you doing down here on the, you know, repeat level? If you want to do really well in piano and be innovative, you should just skip all that and go right to the... Would you do that? Another example I like is with running. You know, what if you're running a 100-meter dash and you've got a coach, and the coach tells you, you know, why are you doing it the same way, moving the same way, training your body the same way for this? You should try running this way, or try running that way, or do it a little this way, or do it a little that way. I don't think we would ever say that, because I think we know, whether we are conscious of it or not, that the practice that makes us fluent and makes our, in the case of our bodies, you know, more fluid and comfortable. This is what I think in most cases makes it most possible to do creative things, to do with language. It makes us more prepared. It's to skip that practice phase. We would never do that in sports or piano. And I think a lot of us, we do skip it. And I'll talk about the main reason why I think we don't pay enough attention to practice. This, I hope we can all agree with. Oh, I agree. The more unconscious the practice, it's the acquisition over the learning. It's the not monitoring. Totally agree. So we agree with this one, right? I think whatever approach we take, I hope, this is what we want. The question is how to get there. Well, I want to argue strongly that they need sufficient practice with the language And here's what I was just referring to as the main reason why they're not getting it. And this is not something new. What I'd like to focus on that I feel is more timely is just, and I said this earlier, that now we have much more opportunity, and others have talked about it this week, both in terms of technology and accessibility to practice and to good practice, not we were talking yesterday about the old cassette tapes that the students had to copy from the teacher, or in our approaches like Stephen was talking about with the extensive writing, or Andy with extensive reading. That by giving students things they can do outside of class that they enjoy, that they engage in, and that involve multiple exposures to the target language, then when we get them to communicate in the classroom, they're much more ready to do it. It's not as simple as slapping the target language up on the board. And the other thing that's not, there's not enough time for is the repetitive practice in the classroom. And which would you rather do? Would you rather spend your short time with your students drilling them, even if it's an engaging way to drill them, or having them in communicative activities with each other? So I think the main thing here, right, is not to go back to the days of, and we'll get into this in a minute, an audiolingual approach of using your time in the classroom, but to outside of class, help students get that practice. It's going to help them and help you because you'll be able to succeed more in your activities. Yeah, and Scott Thornberry, I love that talk. So what happens as a result of not getting this practice? Have you noticed in your students, if they don't get enough exposure to the language that they need to learn, want to learn, that's in your syllabus, in your materials, what happens? I've already said some things, but I mean in your own experience, specifically. Insecurity, absolutely. Like playing a piano in a performance when you haven't practiced. Or running the 100-meter dash when you haven't been jogging. Just can't do it. And it's not their fault. It's not your fault. You can come to a lot of erroneous conclusions dangerous conclusions about themselves, about yourself as a teacher. How about students seem bored? They don't like the activities. How much of that boredom, because in my experience, so much of that boredom is because they don't have the language ready. Not that your activity isn't any good. Not that you're not a native English speaking teacher. This has nothing to do with it. I don't like the idea of drilling all the time either, and I never do it in the classroom. I just encourage them to get it outside. And of course, drilling outside, I don't mean the boring traditional drilling. So I'm going to talk more about that. This is what I found. Similar to what you're saying. Yeah, boredom and too much, and/or, right? Just shutting down. Hyperactivity in young learners. Something that, we can attribute to all kinds of other things when often it's that they're not ready. Trying to get them to do, I've seen so many times teachers with wonderful activities further up Bloom's taxonomy, right? Trying to get them to do some really cool thing where they're doing math and, applying what they've learned because they think the students have learned it, but the students haven't practiced it. They don't have it up here. And so what happens? They tune out, they get frustrated, or they can be hyperactive. The intermediate plateau, I borrowed this collocation from collocation originators, the lexical approach crew. Absolutely jazz chants. Well, I've met Carolyn Graham a couple times. She and I have a few similarities. She published with OUP. I'm publishing chants with OUP. Actually, possibly going to rework some of her stuff at some point. So yeah, it's absolutely the same thing. And this is what I've found, right? If students are not getting enough input, practice is important, but this is really, you know, I'm a big crashing guy in this way, right? If they're not getting comprehensible input, then, right, their confidence is going to go down. They won't be motivated, and then, of course, they won't look for more opportunities to listen and read, etc. Oops, there's etc. again, but it was in a spoken example. Matthew's saying, so much targeting on space, it's a challenge. Yeah. Rolling Stones and yeah, Jay-Z. Do farmers or sailors need to go to the gym? I love Carolyn Graham, man. Imagine Carolyn Graham if she had YouTube at that time, right? And that's what it's all about, that access, you know, outside of class to do that stuff. That's what's so exciting. How many repetitions can you get in the classroom, right? Do farmers or sailors need to go to the gym? And no sarcastic answers, please. Just let's move it along. Work with me here. Actually, Andy's here, so sarcastic answers are okay for people as clever as Andy. So if you got something funny, then I'm okay with it. They might, if sailors are just not doing anything. I'm thinking of the sailor who's, you know, working his butt off or her butt off. In general, somebody please say no, so I can, thank you, go with my analogy. I use these with, thanks Chuck for humoring me there. I use these with both teachers and students, especially students. I think it's important, all right? Most of us need to make an effort to get in shape, and probably as language teachers, you've already figured out what I'm talking about. Most students are not immersed in English. They can't practice while they use. I would argue that farmers and sailors, okay, just farmers, anybody that gets construction workers, that gets exercise while they are working is in that kind of situation, almost like immersion, right? But that's not true for most of us, whether we're talking about getting in shape physically or getting our second language use in shape. So just quickly, I wanted to look at the role of practice very quickly in grammar translation, as it's really not the best example of where practice comes into play. There is practice, but anyway, I'm talking especially today about speaking and listening. Direct and audiolingual, right? Lots of input, pattern practice, and communicative language teaching, more about interactivity and more authentic context and authentic materials, which I didn't put there. What works and what doesn't work? You know, what's really interesting, and I'm sorry, apologies for putting direct and audiolingual bundled together right here, because there are some obviously very important differences between them. But for the purposes of this presentation, if you'll bear with me, there's more of an inductive focus, you know, not looking under the microscope with the language, to a fault, some people would say, and I would say sometimes, right? If you do it, there's more input and output than other approaches. And I love this quote. As much as I despise so many things about direct method and audiolingual, this comes from audiolingual. Practice the structure until it can be used spontaneously. And I love that. The problem, of course, right, is if it's boring, decontextualized content. I remember things from my French high school textbook. I live in Paris. I have, you know, some of that pattern practice and some of those dialogues in my head, a couple of them that, you know, here's one. Allô Delphine, ici Alain. Ah, bonjour Alain. Il neige chic, allons-y dans le jardin. If I could have a dialogue like that up here that I could actually use when I leave my apartment, how cool would that be, right? So not functional, right? And then if you're not doing it because you're bored with it, right? You're not getting the input and output. It does depend, and it's I'm getting to a place where I want to talk about what's good and bad and how we could maybe combine some things. So communicative language teaching, of course, great to be using authentic materials, more situations where students communicate, cooperate to achieve goals interactively. But in my experience, and this is very general here, but in my experience, there's not enough exposure and practice with the target language. And it's great to promote use. It's great to try to get students to, use the language and create things. But without the target language up here, as we said earlier, those activities often don't work very well. And interestingly, there may be too much focus on deductive learning, too much explanation. I've been in so many CLT environments where maybe because there's not just the pattern practice and going with it, that there's interruptions with talking about, what is a particle and, the indirect object, and that can happen too. And I'm not against talking about the language. We already went through that. But how much talking about the language should take place? Don't throw the shallow learning in CLT. It happens all the time. Students say, I love my class. Why? Because in Korea, we never talk about, our opinions, and I'm talking about my culture, and this Italian student I'm talking about my experience in New York City, and that's great. They love it. But the problem for a lot of them is that their fluency and accuracy are not improving because they're not getting enough exposure to the language. How can we do both, right? We need to keep those interesting communicative activities in the classroom, but got to get that practice so that you can actually achieve and move up in the activities. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. What is an easy way to explain that to someone? Like a student. How might you explain? Give an example situation, good. But there's actually a pretty easy way to explain it with very simple English. Don't throw the what out with the what. What do you want to keep? What do you want to hold on to? And what do you want to get rid of? Hold on to the good. Yeah. So often with students, we talk about don't throw the good out with the bad, right? Well, in terms of audiolingual, again, audiolingual here being very general to talk about, kind of direct method, anything where the focus is on the repetitive practice, the pattern practice. On the good side, there's that repetition. On the bad side, boring, out of context, not meaningful, so that students lose motivation. But with CLT, they can lose motivation too. Students saying, as I said, I love talking to my classmates, but I've had those students say, we got these great discussions, but, I still can't get the score I want on the TOEFL, or I still forget to use the past tense, or, when I'm in a situation in real life, I don't feel comfortable because I don't feel like I have the language. So for me, today, the baby in the bathwater, right? I feel it's easier than ever to take the good from audiolingual, the practice side of it, and in an out-of-class context, get that happening with our students so that in the classroom, the communicative activities work. How is that? We can just do repetitive practice with interesting and meaningful language. Happens all the time. Rose was talking about it yesterday. It looks nothing like those drills from AudioLingual. But it just wasn't possible before. What's an example of it? I'm coming to that question in a moment again anyway. Sorry, forgive me, one more analogy. Would you play in a volleyball tournament without practicing with your team? Would you practice with your team without exercising first? Again, humor me here. Okay, thanks, Mark. I talk about a lot how, for me, English class is volleyball practice, right? Because there, when you're doing a role play or you're, doing stuff with dialogues, or you are, working on writing a story. These are all things that, out in the real world, right? You write a story, like we were talking about yesterday, extensive writing. You're doing some free practice with writing, and then you're able to go out and use it. But if you go to volleyball practice, if you go to English class, but you haven't exercised, right? That's that practice that's missing. Unless you're the farmer or the sailor, right? Unless you're immersed in English, you need to work out. Work out for class, and then class for the big game. So don't throw out the baby. The workout is the missing piece. If you don't get that repetitive exposure with the target language, you're going to struggle to achieve your goals. But the answer is not boring, decontextualized drilling. Not cassette tapes, not things that, poor baby, not things that your students wouldn't normally repeat on their own. And that's what I want to talk about now. To me, it's all about out-of-class practice. There's no time in the classroom for that. Moreover, who wants to do a lot of repetitive drilling in the classroom? So, that out-of-class practice helps build the foundation for accuracy and fluency. Then we can move up Bloom's taxonomy with our activities in the classroom. Here are my criteria for practice materials, just what I think about. And the most important one to me is the second one. The students are drawn to doing repetitive practice. So glad Rose is here, because I was thinking about all this stuff so much during her presentation, and Andy's and Stephen's. And Barb's. It was a while back, but Barb talking about how there's, how can we possibly teach 21st century skills? How can we do that when the students need English? It's exactly this, and I would even argue further. How can we don't have enough time in the classroom for that either? So that's what the opportunities now, like Rose spoke about yesterday, for students to be interested and do more autonomous listening practice, reading outside the classroom on their own. We have this opportunity now, and I feel it's our job to encourage it strongly and guide them. So, what's new and good in language practice? I won't read this out loud, and don't have too much time left anyway. But I'll just read the left-hand column here, because it's what I've been talking about already. It's the access, and not just access to practice materials, but more authentic materials. The connections in social media. If people say, well, that doesn't seem like real life, is that a bad thing? Because then maybe it's more on the practice side. And advances in learning technologies. I have a course which I'll mention in a moment that is actually starting today. And the materials, the activities, students get them on a drip feed email system. So they're spaced out to do. And that spaced repetition is really interesting. to help keep students from losing motivation and to help remember vocabulary and structures. What sort of out-of-class practice do your students like to do? Do they borrow the cassette tape from you and copy it and listen to boring dialogues 5,000 times? Which probably, it could help. Well, they're good dialogues. Listening to songs, karaoke. Shoki, awesome. Karaoke, awesome, awesome out-of-class practice. Extensive reading, love it. The first time I heard about extensive reading a few years ago, I was like, yes, because I've been doing that. I didn't know what it was called. I wasn't doing it. I was doing it with a few students here and there. Actually, never done it. I've done a little bit with a whole class. Haven't had a regular class for a while. I'd love to try it if I did. And extensive writing ideas too. Videos, gaming. Every time I see on phone on the subway, I think that's part of your answer there, Global Noble. The reel-to-reel run on the Facebook. Exactly. Great. Gaming. Awesome. Meeting people through gaming and practicing. If you're doing the game in English and getting some important target language there, repeating in the game, and you're also interacting with people. Wow. Very cool. Well, I got an idea recently because lyricstraining.com put this up, one of my songs, and I was so excited about it because people watching my video liked it for practice, but this is even more, right? Gamifying the song. And when I saw that, I had a bit of an epiphany. I thought, I remembered in the old days giving my students cassettes, actually, of me doing less boring, I thought, examples of target language that they would listen and repeat and do dictations with them, written dictations, spoken dictations, but it still wasn't great. And I thought, you know what, I want to make a program, like a workout show, because I used to do it kind of like that, like try to get them excited to listen to the tape and repeat it. So I decided to make this course, the Weekly English Workout. It starts today. Coincidentally, it was supposed to start a couple weeks ago. We had a focus group that just ended recently, and then we just started putting it out there. And I want to talk about it for a moment because I have a special offer for Gallery ITDI teachers in a moment. But it's based on conversations, which I couldn't do in the old days on the tape, right? Video conversations. So we made these conversations for the course. Ooh, thanks for that link, Chuck. And what I do is a lot of repetitive practice, but in a fun way. I'm the coach. We're doing the workout. Do you mind if I sit here? I can repeat, right? Do you mind if I leave? Right? No, not at all, right? So we do this sort of thing because in the classroom, they're not getting enough of it, and this is not the creative stuff. This is that knowledge level. This is that recall level. And then we also do it in chants. Here's another slide of it. How's it going with you? I can't complain. How about you? Oh, the same. Hey, how you doing? Great, how you been? Not too bad, it's good to see you again. Hey, what's up? What's up with you? Not much, really. Nothing new. What have you been up to? The usual, How about you? Oh, same old, same old. So, we go back and forth that way. I do a little bit of raising awareness, talking about, learning about English. I'm talking about intonation and stress, connected speech and that sort of stuff. But it's minimal. It's minimal. It's more the practice. And here's my offer. ITDI and Gallery teachers can try the program for free. We're starting today. So if you want to join as a teacher to check it out, this is just for folks here today and watching the webinar. Very easy to do. All you have to do is send me a message using the contact form on my website. And that is fluencyMC.com. And there's a contact form, and you send me a message. Hey, Jace, I want to check out the program. What I'm looking for, if you join, You don't have to be, do all the materials if you're worried about time. That's not what I want. I want serious teachers to join, but I don't mean serious because you do the program the same way the students do. I want it to be that, then we could have a chat as to how maybe your students might like to use it. I don't mean that they have to buy it, or maybe schools you're in might be interested in it. So that's what would be great for me if you joined, to get your opinion about that. So if we could maybe have a chat about that once you get a sense of what the program's like. You're welcome. It's my pleasure. It's going to really help me too, as you can imagine. What I'm really talking about here, and this is getting to the end, is learning by heart. How might learning by heart be different from memorization? Because some people say what you do is memorization. But I don't think of it that way. I don't think when you listen to your grandmother sing you a lullaby, or you hear the same poem many times and you remember it, that you are memorizing. And certainly with poetry, you can really see how you could memorize the poem or learn the poem by heart, I think. And the heart here has two meanings for me. It's the remembering, but also the meaning, how meaningful it is. Exactly. The meaning. Meaning does not have to be taken away from repetitive practice, right? It's crazy. And of course, the language can be highly functional. So in the weekly workout, if you're wondering, the syllabus is a functional syllabus, high frequency collocations for the different functions. And if you have fun with it and you repeat that, like at the gym, and then you can go out and use, like you take your hot body and you go to the beach, then the practice was worth it. And I will leave you with this. The key to learning English is to lower your stress. Having fun when you learn is when you learn the best. Thank you very much, everybody. I know we're 5 minutes over. We started a few minutes late. So if you have questions, if the ITDI fam will allow it, you're very welcome, Rose. Thanks, Chuck. Oh, thank you. Thanks for inspiring me with your ideas. Thank you, Luke. Thanks, Maria. Nina, oh, wow. Lots of great folks here. Andy Boone says, thanks, Jace. That was ace. He was sorry to be late when you were so great. Can we keep the chat rap going? We got to be flowing a few more minutes. If you have questions, I'll try to stay here and steer you in the right direction. And you can do the same for me. We're all together here, ITDI. We flow free and flow and fly high up in the sky. Please check out my site and send me a contact form. Tell me if you want to join the course. Yeah, Brian, BB, you're in for the ride, yeah. And like I said, you don't I don't want to get anyone anxious here. If I join the course, I have to do this whole course. I have so much to do in the school year starting. It's more, right, just a way to check it out, and then maybe we can have a chat, and you can let me know what you think of it, right?
I'm there. Great. Michaela's got it right there. Joyful, amazing, super educator. That's Jason R. Levine. Look at Steven's line. Jace convinces like a preacher when a gallery's
Brian's in already. Thanks, Brian. Woohoo! Any questions, anyone? Yeah. Michaela's so kind. Thank you, Michaela. Can't wait to get back to Sicily this year.
We are.
Oh, I'm going to take that one. Jace convinces like a preacher when a gallery's hot teachers. But each
That was just
and every
fabulous.
one
Thank you
of
so much,
you
Jason.
is in for the ride. We fly high with gallery
I said I'd
and
pop in and keep you some
ITDI.
company here.
Oh, you were really in the groove. I'd love to see Steve Herder doing some moves.
Steven's back with his arrogance.
See Steve Herder doing some moves. You guys got some great rhymes today. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Chuck. It was fun. Please do.
You gotta
Oh, yeah,
rhyme for that,
Stephen.
Jason.
Yeah, you're back with the arrogance, man. I told you to leave that at the door. Oh, here we go.
Hang on, everybody.
Is that
I'm gonna take you
actually
back
a
to the
costume,
lobby.
or is that like
And by the way, those three
shower
pictures
cap?
on the bottom of the screen are the 3 people who are going to be giving ITDI advanced courses coming up. You got me,
Okay,
myself,
everyone look at
and
Stephen
I,
for a
Chuck,
moment
in
and
September,
imagine
Luke Mettings
Eminem
in
with
October,
glasses.
and Philip
There's
Kerr
something a little bit,
in
something
November. Some
happening
of the
there.
courses coming up for an ITDI. Moving back to the lobby.
There's something going on.
There we go.